Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'm pretty impressed with the turnout of today's talk. To me, this indicates your commitment to eat healthy and basically your commitment in the new year to lead a healthier lifestyle. So as she mentioned, I'm a faculty in the Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health and Population Health, and my research focuses on diet and cancer. And in the past 7 years, I've actually been studying the obesity-cancer link, and I want to share some of that with you today. So I'm sure many of you have seen this diagram before, which basically tracks obesity rates in the United States in the past 2 decades. And as you can see, the more red you see in these diagrams, the proportion of obesity is greater. So today, current rates are about 35% of the population actually meets the clinical criteria for obesity. And it just so happened that the cancer rates have also been increasing in parallel to obesity. So is this just a coincidence, or could there really be a link between cancer and obesity? I'm sure many of you in this room either have a family member or a friend or know of someone with cancer, and it seems to be this new, common, normal disease to have as people age. So one reason is that there are better screening methods. Another reason is that people are living longer. But the more important reason that we can actually have any control over is that it's obviously related to the environment or lifestyle in some way. So the current cancer rates in the US are that if people were to live long enough, let's say there was no hypothetically, if there was no cardiovascular disease, no heart disease, then theoretically everyone would have cancer if they lived long enough. Right now, 1 in 2 people have any kind of cancer. 1 in 6 men in their lifetime will have prostate cancer. 1 in 13 will have lung cancer, and about 1 in 29 have colon cancer. And these are the statistics for men. For women, it's 1 in 3 women will have any kind of cancer. 1 in 8 women will have breast cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 16 will have lung cancer, and 1 in 20 will have colorectal cancer. So these are pretty high numbers. And several researchers undertook the study of looking at if there was a link between obesity and cancer. And the World Cancer Research Fund looked at all of these studies that were out there. They integrated all the studies that were out there and actually published in their expert panel report in 2007 that there were several cancer sites. There was convincing evidence that there were several cancer sites that were associated with obesity. So some of these are the most commonly detected cancers in the United States. It includes colorectum, breast, prostate, specifically postmenopausal breast cancer, kidney cancer, endometrial cancers. Most of the female cancers actually were all associated with obesity. So this is something that I like to, something that I came up with. I think there is a continuum of chronic diseases. And what does that mean? Most people who are obese, not everyone, but most people who are obese or first get obese and then move on to getting diabetes, which includes perturbed or disturbed glucose metabolism in the body. Most people who have diabetes will then move on. They have a greater risk for heart disease and will then move on to get heart disease. And all of these together, obesity, diabetes, and risk factors of heart disease, which means increased triglycerides, whether fatty acids have gone haywire in the blood. Some of these are risk factors for heart disease, and all of these cumulatively will increase the risk for cancer, either developing cancer or once the person has cancer, maybe cancer progression, if they have these risk factors existing. So I like to think about chronic diseases as a continuum, and the link between obesity and cancer might have a lot to do with the insulin glucose metabolism and some of these other blood values. And that's really the focus of my research in the past 5 to 7 years, when I'm trying to look at what the potential mechanisms in human beings would link obesity to cancer. Okay, so a lot of us think that being obese, I mean, what does it mean to be obese? It means that there are lots of fat cells, large fat cells that are sitting around in our body, but they're not passively sitting around really. They're actively secreting lots of chemicals called hormones, or some of these are markers of inflammation. It means it increases inflammation in the body. And these hormones can create a lot of havoc. They can actually lead to heart disease, diabetes, but also provide a biochemical environment in the body that encourages the growth of cancer cells. Okay, so this is just a picture of a fat cell, and some of the names of, I mean, we know of about 50 or more chemicals that the fat cell is capable of producing, but these are just some of the examples in this particular diagram. Okay, so basically, the bottom line of everything I'm saying right now is that obesity could increase inflammation. It could create hormonal imbalances, because the fat cell is an active organ that's pumping out some of these chemicals into the blood. And the people who are obese for longer periods will have these hormonal imbalances due to the fat cells for longer periods of time. So there is exposure for longer periods and could be at a greater risk for cancer. So it's not only being obese, but it's the duration of obesity that's also important. Okay. Insulin resistance, how many of you know what that is? What is insulin resistance? Well, when I use the word insulin, what disease are you thinking of right away? Diabetes, that's right. Well, guess what? Now there's new evidence, and this is also something that I'm researching right now, that insulin is probably the culprit that links obesity to cancer. It is a hormone that increases survival of cancer cells. It helps cancer cells go from one part of the body to the other. So it helps to spread cancer. It helps cancer tumors progress faster and survive for longer periods of time, because insulin just has that property. So all of this comes down to weight management, right? If you had a healthy weight within normal range, then you would not have the risk factors most likely for diabetes. Your insulin levels would be in check, and inflammatory markers would be in check, and it would decrease. At least this is one of the things that is in our control. I've heard of this very often when I'm talking to cancer patients. Oh, but it's in our genes. Well, no, I think the genes matter, but I think I give them the example of Mowgli in Jungle Book. Mowgli might have been intelligent, but you put him in a jungle, he'll behave that way. You take him out and you put him through, Harvard University, he'll behave differently. So, is that better? Is that better? Okay, thank you for letting me know that, because I wouldn't have known you can't hear me. So again, it's the genes, they behave and express in a certain way, and in obese people, the genes will behave differently from non-obese people. So it's kind of time to take personal responsibility and not blame the genes alone. So have you heard of BMI, body mass index? It's basically taking into consideration your height, and it's not fair to look at weight alone. I think taller people are allowed to have a higher weight and still be in the normal weight range. Short people, so the BMI basically considers height in relation to weight. Okay, so I'm not going to really go through the BMI classifications, but basically anywhere above 25 BMI units is considered overweight and obese. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about eating healthy, but not only what you as a person can take responsibility for. Eating healthy comes along with the food environment around you, the context of policy and the social networks that you actually engage in. So I'm going to give you, we're going to talk about individual factors, but we're going to go beyond that just so that you can keep your eyes and ears open when you function in this society and realize how all of these factors influence your food choices. Okay, so let's start with what you can do as an individual. And this first slide on individual level factors comes from the American Institute for Cancer Research that has actually established some guidelines for, which I think should be for cancer prevention, but for every individual to follow these guidelines, because there's only one good diet, whether it's to prevent cancer, heart disease, diabetes, or any chronic disease. I think this is the lifestyle everyone should aim to live. So I'm going to actually read these out because they're important. You're going to have a copy of this to take home. But be as lean as possible without becoming underweight. Okay, so that's really important. The thinner, the better is really not the mantra here. Be physically active for at least 30 minutes a day, and I'm going to give you some ideas of how to do that. Avoid sugary drinks and limit consumption of energy-dense foods. And what do all of these mean is, again, what I'm going to elaborate on. Eat a variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans. Limit consumption of red meat and avoid processed meats. And if consumed at all, limit alcoholic beverages. Two drinks a day for men and 1 drink for women, but really there's no recommendation for alcohol intake. Limit consumption of salty foods and foods processed in salt, and do not use supplements to protect against cancer or any disease. There's been some evidence against supplements. In fact, studies have shown that eating supplements could increase the risk of some diseases because, after all, they're chemicals that are all put in one capsule, and the long-term effects are just not known. So we don't recommend that you take it unless you have a doctor who's asking you to do it for a specific reason. Okay, and in new moms or women who are planning to have babies, it's really important that they understand the benefits of breastfeeding, but in general for weight maintenance, but also it decreases the risk of breast cancer. Okay. So research has unfortunately shown that, when people actually get cancer, it's a teaching moment for them. It's a time in their lives they're willing to make the change. They're really motivated. And we would imagine that they would respond to some of these guidelines that have been put forth. However, research has shown among cancer patients that less than 20% of cancer patients were actually eating the 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day that were recommended. They still continued to consume processed food, refined starches. They still continued to consume red meat as well as alcohol. As far as exercise, there were less than 40% of patients, depending on what kind of cancer they had, because some had the energy to exercise and some were more motivated, and others, for example, prostate cancer, where their life was more normal, had lower rates of physical activity. So I think the reasons for this were that it's very easy to come and say, do this and do that, but it's harder for people to translate these in their daily lives. So I think the how to eat better, the how to increase physical activity to at least 30 minutes was not always clear, and that's the reason why cancer patients were not always able to respond to some of these guidelines that were put out there. So I'm going to quickly talk about healthy eating, and the next speaker is also going to touch upon this. So, well, basically, I've put a picture of a plate here, and I want you to know that there are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, but not all of them are created equally. You have the good and the healthy carbohydrates and the unhealthy carbohydrates. You have the good protein and the bad protein. You have the good fats or the healthy fats and the bad fats. So I know most of the times fats in general are just given a bad name. Carbs are given a bad name, but no, you have the good and the bad. And what we are hoping to teach you through today's talk are that you can eat plenty of carbs, plenty of proteins, and plenty of, not plenty of fats, but the amount of fat that your body requires, but the right type. It's the choice you make of all these that's important. So I'm going to get into the good choices next, but basically choose one protein. It's the 1-2-3 rule. Choose one protein serving, choose 2 carbohydrate servings, and 3 non-starchy vegetable servings. What is non-starchy? Think like not potatoes, but maybe carrots, green leafy vegetables, something that have more nutrients in it. And I'm hoping that you'll learn more as we go through the next few slides. So what kind of vegetables are important? The dark green and orange vegetables are important. Both fresh and frozen, whatever is convenient to you. I think this market offers a lot of variety. And also try to, mix your whole grains and your other carbohydrates with spinach where you can. Throw in some broccoli. Try some mashed cauliflower. So you get all of these in the supermarket. Maybe if you want to make a meal, just keep some of these chopped and frozen vegetables handy. Throw in some peas, throw in some corn, throw in some whatever vegetable you like, and make sure that you always have that handy while you're cooking or preparing your meals. Okay. So as for fruits, what counts as a fruit? What about fruit in a can with heavy sugar syrup? Yes, it is a fruit, but it's not the healthy choice to make. Nothing beats fresh fruit or frozen fruit, but juices is something that you have to, be cautious about, and I'm going to separately talk about juices momentarily. But try and increase fresh fruit intake whenever possible. Use it as a dessert, a snack. You can combine it with yogurt and make a parfait, or eat it with low-fat cheese, and these are some good ideas for, snacking, or, think about serving this. Maybe if you like eating ice cream, maybe you can just decrease the amount of ice cream and eat that with a lot of fruit. So you have a fruit and ice cream combination. So there are many creative ways and lots of recipes out there, even on the internet, that you can avail of to make these changes. About starchy carbohydrates, look for whole grains, whole grain breads, whole grain cereals, whole grain pasta, tortillas, brown rice, oatmeal. But sometimes products can say whole grain, even if half of the product contains whole grain and is mixed with refined flour. So it's really important that you learn to read labels. A lot of people don't read labels because they don't have their specs handy, or who has the time. I mean, I don't have the time. I'm conscious about these things, but half the time I'm not even looking at labels. But what I did do is made 1 or 2 trips to the supermarket where I had a lot of time, and I noted some of the brands so that I knew what was there in the products, and then it becomes kind of like a routine thing. You just know what brands or what products you're going to put in your basket. So read the labels. I think all the information is out there. Sometimes it could be misleading. Another common issue that I've come across with some of the patients that I've talked to, because I do some nutrition education sessions with patients. When the label says per serving, these are how many calories, this is how much fiber, this is how much whole grains, they don't realize that the packet could have 2 or 3 servings. They're just assuming that whatever numbers are listed there is for the entire packet. So make sure that you stop and read the labels. And most of these things, the calories and whole grains and the vitamins, everything is listed on there. So why bother with whole grains? It's because it is the processing really takes away the outside layers of the grain, and along with that, the vitamins, some protein, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin E content goes away. And what you're left with in the refined grain is probably more calories and less nutrients. So you're not getting the bang for its buck, if I may say so, for the grain. So the unhealthy carbohydrates are obviously donuts. Americans drink their calories, and iced coffee or a smoothie might have way more calories than you can even imagine, and I'm sure the next speaker is going to touch upon that too. Okay. Cookies, candies, ice creams, donuts. I'm not saying don't eat it, but be creative in how you use it. Maybe combine it with healthier sources, reduce the frequency, reward yourself maybe, once in 2 weeks. with a dessert that you like, and that way you can reduce the added sugars. So added sugars is really something that I'm actually studying that now, and I'm shocked at how much added sugar there is. There's sugars in things that you would totally not imagine. Breads, pizza dough, things that are not sweet will actually have added sugars because they are used for processing or for yeast fermentation. So the amount of added sugars that you might end up taking in is much more than you realize, because there is some amount of added sugars in a lot of processed foods. Also, added sugars could be in the cups of coffee that you have. It all adds up. It all adds up at the end of the day. Through honey, even though people think honey has a slimming effect when you put it in hot water, I'm not sure why, because it's still sugar. It's still a different form of sugar. So watch your added sugars. That's a huge culprit. And sugars, mind you, increase blood sugar levels and can be a direct fuel. Cancer cells are growing very rapidly, and it can be a direct fuel for cancer cells to grow. So you're kind of feeding the cancer cells, in a lay person's language, you're feeding the cancer cells sugar to grow. So what about juices? So this is coming back to what I said earlier. Juices are better than soda maybe, because it might have some nutrients and some fiber if that's not a clarified juice, but it's definitely not something that can replace a whole fruit. First of all, for cancer patients particularly, it's the sanitary measures have to be kept in mind, because they have an immune response that's weaker than a normal person. But it takes many oranges to get one glass of juice, and it's a misconception that juices detox the body. I guess it's a good marketing gimmick, but it's not true. And then when juice it's like the better of two evils. Juice is better than soda, but it doesn't have proteins, fats, the essential fats at least. It has more calories than a fruit. It has no, or sometimes a little bit of fiber compared to the fruit, and it is capable of raising the blood sugar, which means it also spikes up your insulin, which I explained earlier, provides an environment for the cancer cells to grow. And what about sugar substitutes? There are several sugar substitutes in the market, and my beef with sugar substitutes is when it first came out, it was meant for maybe diabetics to use very sparingly. They would be over 50, 60 years of age. But now you even have, you have it on every single coffee shop table, and you can even have a teenager at 13 using sugar substitutes. So the exposure is for many more years in their lives, and we have no idea whatsoever what the long-term effects of these sugar substitutes are. So use it in moderation, and it's best to avoid it. Don't make a habit out of it. Okay. Proteins, again, there are good and bad quality proteins. Red meat could be very fatty. Avoid those. Maybe you can have lean meats like fish or chicken. And a lot of people didn't know that beans, eggs, nuts, seeds, and soy are also proteins and very good sources of proteins. And of course, dairy. The choice should be low-fat dairy, although there is some research that's emerging now that that whole milk is probably more nutritious for various reasons. We don't know the evidence clearly on this yet. It's just been recent research. However, I would say use a combination of both before we know better. And there are the healthy and the unhealthy fats. The unhealthy fats are those that tend to be solid at room temperature, which are the saturated and the trans fats. A lot of products are now, you'll see no trans fats. They're making an effort to not use trans fats, but you have to make sure that you read the labels again. And the healthy fats are olive oil and all vegetable oils, polyunsaturated fats, especially walnut oil and fish oils. So you can even get fish oil when you consume the whole fish, especially dark fish. Okay. So the bottom line is to keep the bad fats low, and I'm not going to go through all the grams because this is not a math class, but again, read the labels. I really urge people to read labels because they're there for a purpose, and not enough people are using that. So this is the interesting concept of a plate makeover. So if you want to use the same ingredient, it could be cooked differently or used in a combination with other interesting ingredients to make a dish which you can see is the same portion or even more, which means you can eat a lot for half the calories just by using these ingredients differently in your cooking. Okay, so these are examples where these dishes, so this is chicken and French fries, and you can use oven-baked fish sticks or maybe chicken with dipping sauce, apples, and maybe a side of spinach and vegetables. Okay, so you still have your meat, you have all the food groups, and it's almost half the calories, and it's still a lot of food. So I've put many examples. This is barbecue on white roll with French fries, but remember I said choose the whole grains. So this is grape and cashew salad sandwich with baby carrots, and this again is almost 60%, 40% fewer or 60% of the original calories. So I've got different examples here, and you have the slides to take home. I'm going to give you one more and move on in the interest of time. There's green bean salad with fried onions, and this is a bean salad with whole grain bread and milk. Again, most of these recipes have become half in the caloric intake just by what I call the plate makeover, just by using these ingredients sensibly and replacing with good choices. A lot of these recipes are available online. If you Google or type plate makeover, they actually give you the nutritional value and teach you how to make them, give you the recipe, and they're pretty quick and easy. This is another example. Again, look at how much red meat there is, the choice of bread, and it's been replaced by healthier options. That's a creamy soup and a low-calorie soup instead, with whole grain pita and hummus. So this brings me to physical activity, and I want to say that, let me actually use the word physical inactivity. So physical inactivity is a completely independent risk factor for cancer. So if you decide to go to the gym 30 minutes a day, and you think you've done your physical activity, that's great. But let's say there are two people. One person goes to the gym for 30 minutes a day and sits on the computer for 14 hours for the rest of the day, or sleeps or sits and watches TV. The other person does 30 minutes a day, but he walks around, he takes the stairs, or decides to walk to work instead of taking the subway, even if it's at a slow pace, okay? So what I'm trying to say is that there's physical activity and the rest of it is physical inactivity. So they're both completely different risk factors. The person who has 30 minutes plus has a much more active lifestyle just by walking around the office or, taking the stairs is going to have a lower risk for cancer and other chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, as compared to the person who has 30 minutes of gym and does nothing else. So physical inactivity is this new literature that's emerging and showing us that as our lives are getting more and more sedentary, that's a separate risk factor. Most people don't know that. So this is just an example of a work day. The sitting opportunities are plenty. You sit in the car, especially if you live in the suburbs, you go and sit in your office, then you sleep at night for, hopefully everyone sleeps for at least 8 hours. And the sitting or sedentary opportunities a day could be easily 16 hours. I mean, can you imagine being active? Maybe you stand in the shower, so that counts as standing, but the rest of the time it's sitting around. Okay, so these are, again, I'm not going to go through every single one, but these are ways to make every step count. Take stairs, park a little further away, walk to deliver messages. And with the email culture, we're emailing people in the next office. It was funny, we can Skype people in the next office. So go walk your dog, all that kind of stuff. And sedentary choices would be calling or emailing, taking the elevator, just many examples that I can give on this. But this is the interesting fact here. Look at these numbers. If you're the kind of person who makes less sedentary choices, all of these add up, and you can actually end up burning almost 4,000 calories by all these small activities adding up. But if you're the kind of person who makes sedentary choices, then you burn less than 500 calories in a week. So I think every step counts, and that's something to take note of. Also, these are free activities. You don't have to go and join a gym. Walking, jogging, light office work, cleaning, these are all free activities, and the calories that you burn will add up. So now I'm moving on to things that go beyond what you can do for yourselves as an individual. Things in the interpersonal. What is interpersonal? Your interaction in social networks, your physical and social environment. And I'm going to give you some quick examples of that. So research has shown that obese people have obese friends. Fat people tend to hang out with fat friends, and they all share the same lifestyles and food. And research has also shown that people who have family meals at a table tend to be, the children tend to have obesity rates that are 40% lesser or fewer than people who don't have family meals. And it was funny, I went to a high school to do a talk on eating well, and I asked students to raise their hands. How many of you have family meals? And there were 2 students out of 45 in that day's lecture that said they even ate as a family. Most of them said, my father, picks up a brown bag on the way back home, and I just, munch on it while I'm walking. There's no concept of family meals. And some of these patterns are have become part of our lifestyle and are impacting the way we eat and the choices that we make. Okay, another social thing is, all you can eat in less than $10. Well, dietary variety in this country, okay? Dietary variety, I'm talking about 5 varieties of cookies and 5 varieties of, noodles, has led to the problem of obesity. And there's new research that's come out to talk about this from both psychology and nutritional perspectives. So how about talking about variety among the healthful food groups? Maybe that could make eating more interesting and also lead to a healthier weight maintenance. Other social factors which we cannot ignore is our cyber environment. How many of you have iPhones? Or at least smartphones? Okay, well, guess what? You can actually, with a click of a button, order from more than 2,000 restaurants, and you'll have food on your table. And the 2,000 restaurants that you can order from may or may not be healthy choices, right? You can order a Starbucks Frappuccino before you can actually say the word and walk to it to pick it up. So these are all the choices. It's Facebook. If you say out to lunch on your Facebook status, then you get lunch coupons that you'll see in your Facebook by the time you come back from lunch. And those coupons might encourage meals that are not really, don't go along with eating guidelines, okay? So this is your cyber environment. You just can't help it. You're a function of that. You're exposed to that. Look at some of these coupons that, that promote buy one, get one free, or Happy Meals that you see in McDonald's. What are the Happy Meals? If you look at what they sell as a marketing gimmick, it's all unhealthy choices. Okay, here's the example of a Happy Meal to a child. I mean, this is probably 3,000 calories right there, but it's easy to gulp down and eat French fries. So this is just another accessibility and marketing. If you wanna work later, or if you're a student who's studying late and you didn't get dinner, and if you only have unhealthy choices around you, or if you go to a convenience store that doesn't store fruit because it gets it just gets rotten because no one's buying it, then you'll say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to have a packet of chips. What do vending machines offer you? So again, you are a function of what your food environment is. So you have to kind of watch out and keep that in mind when you make choices for yourself. We're going to hear a lot about portion sizes in the next talk, but as you know, portion sizes have increased. So you can't say, I just had one burger, I just had one bagel, because that could now be 5 times or 4 times the calories of what the bagel used to mean many years ago. So I want to now talk, the last part of my talk is on the policy context. There is food, there's policy around food. And again, you are a function of the policy that exists around you. So the government actually started calorie labeling. How many of you even bother to look at how many calories there are when you buy something? That's great. A lot of people have reported that they can't see it, it's too small, the numbers are too small, they don't know, they can see the numbers, but they don't know what it means. And the best response I've got so far, which I'm not surprised about, is, oh, $1 only bought us 300 calories, but in that food, the $1 bought us 500 calories. So why not just get more calories for just $1? And it kind of went the other way. So research has in fact shown that even after calorie labeling, people were not exactly buying fewer calories. They were purchasing the same amount of calories because of a lot of misconception. What is a calorie? A lot of people just didn't know what that means. So, I think policy is one thing, but education, personal responsibility, everything goes together. If they don't understand what all this means, it's not going to work. So the Department of Health, the New York City Department of Health, also has some programs that they've launched for the community. It's called the Healthy Workplace Program, where they encourage corporations to sign up for this, where they make them commit that they're not going to actually serve unhealthy beverages, and they give them options and ideas of what to serve in meetings and conferences. Okay. Other initiatives are green cart initiatives. How many of you go to the farmer's market and take free cooking demos and cooking classes and understand how you can use leafy greens in many different ways? Okay, there is Shape Up New York, where they actually pay for you to take exercise classes. And there are many other initiatives that are being in place for the community. So take advantage of all of those. And I want to end by saying to eat with a pinch of common sense and a dash of moderation to keep the diet balanced. And I think that this would partially alleviate the condition of several chronic diseases all at once. Thank you very much for your attention.